Now, this is always at the end of the day, or I guess at the beginning of the day, a parametric teapot. So if I click on teapot, it's going to give me a warning, and it's going to say a modifier exists in the stack that depends on topology, and usually edit poly or edit mesh modifiers depend on topology. That means that if I change any or some of the number of faces in the teapot, what's going to happen is these polys, these edit poly modifiers, which depend on face numbers or vertex numbers or whatever, all that's going to change all of a sudden. So let's say it's going to give me a list of what they are or what the first one is. So let's say, okay, yes, I want to continue. Now, if I change the radius, that's not really a problem. If I turn the lid off, it could be a problem. If I turn the spout off, again, a little bit of a problem, because what's happening is, since it's doing this by face order, this might be face number 231. Well, if I turn off the lid, all of a sudden those might not be the same numbers. Or if I turn off the body, or if I turn off the handle. See, if I turn off the body, all of a sudden those face numbers that I extruded became face number 231 and 232 or whatever. And so it isn't really entirely that smart about what you've done, because it has to do it by number. And so when the initial numbers change, then it can wreak havoc on your modified objects. Same thing if I take and change the number of segments. So now I've taken the number of segments, all of a sudden the numbers have completely changed orders, and it has no idea what I meant by some of these modifiers here. If I change it back to 5, it'll pop back into place. So the idea, edit polys and edit meshes do depend on topology. So you want to make sure that before you start editing these polys down, you make sure that you have the appropriate number of segments that you think you're going to need. There are ways to go in and add segments later, but they're not quite as easy or as clean as just clicking a button, clicking a spinner. There's a couple other ways to get an editable poly mesh or editable mesh. First of all, you can add the modifier. There's a couple of modifiers that do it. This is the one that I use most often, edit poly, as I said. You can also right click here, and even without edit polys in there, there's a couple of menu items, collapse to and collapse all. Collapse all will take that entire thing and collapse it into one big editable poly. Now I have no access to the original creation parameters of that teapot, but it is an editable poly, and it has sub-objects that I have access to, and all the same like I had with the modifier. So, but again, I have no access to the original teapot. So only convert when you're well positive you don't need to get access to the original parameters. Now you can also convert through the quad menu. So you go to the quad menu, and remember we saw the quad menu before, how it wasn't quite a quad menu yet. I just had tools 1. Well, now I have tools 2 down here, so I can do, in this mode, I can only do create. But if I change it to polygon, let's say, and I pick a poly and I do quad menu, now all of a sudden I get access to a bunch of tools, and those tools mirror the ones that we would see here. So now all of a sudden, okay, now we get why it's called a quad menu. So I can do another extrude on this poly. And it's a quick way to get to some of the commands that are in the modifier panel here. But the other thing that I can do with the quad menu is take and click over this, and now I have a convert to menu. So I can convert to an editable mesh, editable poly, or an editable patch. So let's actually make something using these tools.